Sounded weird the way I said that. Hello, Applied Digital Studies, Section 1, University of Mary Washington. This is Professor Whalen, and I am joining you on this lovely Wednesday afternoon to talk to you about programming and computer stuff. So, good afternoon. Hope you're doing well. Hope you enjoyed that ambient, thing. My audio is echoing? Really? Oh, I see why. Yeah, it was picking up two inputs. That should have cleared it, I think. Let me know if that cleared it. I think it probably did. Yeah, I don't know why it was picking up the input stream twice and then sending it through two different sources in OBS. I don't know. It's weird sometimes. So anyway, good afternoon. Today, I'm going to be talking about quite a few things, and that's why I thought it would be useful for me to do a stream as opposed to a Zoom, and even as opposed to having some of us attend class face-to-face, because that is an option now, and I do want to do that option or explore that option with you all, but starting next week. So I'm not in the classroom right now. Hopefully none of you are there either, but if you are, you can watch the stream from there, and that would be fine, I assume. So good afternoon. Thanks for saying hi in the chats, both of the chats. It's good to see you all saying hello and letting me know who's out there. I always appreciate that. So I'm not going to check off who's here, count roll, but it is good to see, a good chunk of people. Something you might have noticed in Discord is that I've actually assigned roles to everyone according to which section they're in. So everybody that's chatting above me right now, you'll see is this reddish orange color. And the last chat conversation you can see a bit farther up in the scroll there is blue from last week, and that's section 2. So section 1 is this reddish orange color for now. Section 2 is a bluish color for now. I might change those colors. It doesn't really matter. It just makes it easy for me to address all of you at once by section. So I can say at section 1, I'm going live right now, like I just did a minute ago. You all can also use those ats to address people in your section if you need to get a hold of them in that organization. There may be other cohorts or groupings as well later in the semester, but for now anyway, that's probably the main group you identify with, like which section you're in. So that's available to you. You would just type at and then section 1, and then it would, the Discord would autocomplete and tell you to do that. So feel free to do that if you need to. Again, today is going to be mostly me explaining some things, so I thought it would be useful to kind of do this. That said, there is something I hope I can try by the end of class with you all, which I have to see if it's done processing yet. Oh, it is. Good. Okay. Let me just check something here. Okay. Okay. That looks like it worked. Okay. I will explain that later. So the thing that I want to talk about, several things. First of all, I want to kind of just go over a couple of things that I shared in the video on Monday. Hopefully you saw that. It was fairly short as a video. I wanted to get kind of straight to the point and get through it. But I can spend a little bit more time on any part of that if you have any questions about how to find things or what to do and how things are going. But I feel like I'm still introducing this class to you all. So I can do some more of that today. I hope to talk more philosophically today than practically. But I want to talk about and make sure you guys are comfortable with what I'm asking you to do on a day-to-day basis and how to find those kinds of things. So if you have any questions at all about this, let me know. I'll try to keep an eye on both chats, although it's kind of hard for me to see. So I have so many, on this computer I have like 60 or 70 tabs up, so I can't actually see individual tabs. So I have to keep it on one tab. I can't explore over there or else I'm going to get lost. But anyway, so I'm going to talk through some things, but if you have any questions, throw them into the chat and I will try to address them as I see them. So first of all, just to kind of reiterate a couple things from that video, I'm not going to go through the whole thing again because I recorded it already. The way you can find things, of course, the announcements here on the homepage. The modules link is where you can find the day-to-day stuff, and I might even make that the homepage. I think I can put the module here on the homepage instead of having to go over here, because these links are useful, I think, but you probably want the day-to-day stuff more readily. Here it is. So this is module 1, living and working with algorithms, and here we are Wednesday, February 3rd. And so what we can do is look at this and see what's going on for today. And eventually it will load. Okay, good. So as you can see, there's a couple things I wanted you to look at and learn about and from. There's a discussion page I've asked you to contribute to. I'm not going to click into it now because it has your real names on it, but many of you have. I've seen that. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Overall, our goal for today is to contextualize programming. So to essentially answer that question that I posed in that discussion page, which is why program? Right? So why? I mean, you can talk about it in terms of what Nick Montfort says, what Douglas Rushkoff says. Similar ideas, not exactly the same. But what do you think? Like, why do you think you want to program? And as much as possible, and I'll see what you've written, but as much as possible, I hope we can think beyond the instrumental. So it's not just like, I want to program so I can program, or I want to program so I can tell computers what to do. Like, I want to see if we can think a bit more broadly, and that's what I think Nick Montfort's especially, but also Douglas Rushkoff's ideas help us to do. And so I wanted to explain some ideas along those lines. But I look forward to seeing what you all have written. Certainly. Let me go ahead and kill my music. There we go. So it was hopefully not playing, but it was still playing, but you couldn't hear it hopefully. Okay, so that's today, and then this is what I'd like for you to do after class today. There's some things to look at. Giving you the ideas from Kathy O'Neill's book. I mean, you can find I think we have the book in our library. You can read the whole thing if you want to, but I think watching these two brief segments of it, or watching this video, listening to this segment, I think you'll get the main idea, which is really all we need to work with. So get that idea, and then complete the code practice. So many of you have turned that in, so I want to explain a little bit about that. Of course, you're welcome to turn things in early, but for those of you who might still be working on it, I want to make sure you see a couple things, and then maybe explain how to work through that in case that's a little unclear. So that's the idea for today. That's kind of my big agenda. Let me just check my notes, see if there's anything else. So the other thing to keep in mind is, obviously we're not meeting in person today, but if you would like to attend class for a face-to-face experience or conversation, I think there could be a lot of benefits to that, especially as we move forward into the more programming kind of stuff. So if you want to take advantage of that opportunity, if you live on campus or nearby, I've got a sign up genius for that. So click that link and do that if you want to. If you don't want to, or if you can't, that's okay too. There will still be stuff for you to do on that day. This is Wednesday, February 10th, when I have that option available. We'll see how that goes, and if there might be a better way to handle the signups, like something more Canvas centered, but this seems to work fine. I think a couple of people have already signed up, so I'll see you all, at least a couple of you, on Wednesday. But also, like, this is another way for me to see, like, if no one signs up, then I won't be there either. I'll just do it from home. But it looks like a couple people are, so that's great. All right, so that's the idea for how these pages work. Again, really the modules link gets you to this kind of table of contents view of the next couple weeks of class. So that's what I would steer you towards. If you're having a hard time finding things, look for that modules link. I wish I could rename that to schedule or something like that, but Canvas doesn't give me much flexibility there. All right, so seeing no questions, I hope everybody's okay. So let me just double check Discord. Yeah, looking good. So let's take a look at some specifics. Oh yeah, let me jump to the code homework first, and then we'll get back into some content. Okay, so this is the assignment page in Canvas. The idea is that you click this notebook link here, and then it should open in your Google Drive. And if you don't already have the Google Colab app added to your Drive account, it might ask you to activate it or something. I don't remember. It's been so long, I don't remember if I had to do anything like that, but you might have to. If some of you have done this recently, so if you remember anything like that, then let me know in chat. But otherwise, I think you just kind of click into it and then you start using it. And this is it. So this is my notebook. I can edit my notebook, but you won't be able to. You'll actually be able to run the code. You shouldn't be able to edit the text in here. So what you should do first is go to File and then Save a Copy in Drive, and it'll pop up. And I'm going to do this now to show you what to do. It'll make a copy for yourself. If you don't mind, I'll show you one more step that would be a little bit convenient for me. If you don't mind, like, rename this to include your actual name so that it's easier for me. If I have like a bunch of them open in multiple tabs, it'll be easy for me to see who's I'm looking at. So if you just name it Zach Whalen's copy of, or Zach Whalen Code Practice 1, whatever. I mean, name it, like, don't type Zach Whalen, type your actual name, not my name. That will make it easier for me to see. So please, just if you think of it, that's great. If not, or if you already turned it in, don't worry about it. Just a little tip there. So that's the idea. So then you've got your copy to work with. Okay, thanks. Who's that? Grant. Thanks. Yeah, I remember it being pretty simple, and that's kind of why I like Colab, because it's usually pretty straightforward. Okay, now that we're here, we have some code practice. And as you hopefully recall, the basic mixed modality of Colab notebooks are that we have text. You can also include images and video too, but we've got text here, and then we've got code. And you can read the text and you can run the code. You can change the code and run it again and see if something different happens. And there's a lot of pretty sophisticated stuff happening in this notebook, even though it seems pretty simple, or maybe, or it should, I hope, I don't know. It's meant to be introductory, so these code cells, except for the last one, will all run the way they are without any modification. You don't have to supply anything, but I'm prompting you to supply different things to so you can start to get a sense of what you can change and what difference that makes. So even though the task here at the beginning is conventional, many programming curricula start with a very similar statement, like print hello world. That's a convention. Like, it's a cultural convention of programming instruction that we tend to do. It's a good way to just basically confirm that the thing you're doing does what you think it does. Like, it's a Python engine. It will print this back because this is Python 3 syntax. And so if this works, then that means that I can continue to write other things in Python 3 syntax, and then I can feel confident that it's probably going to work. It just kind of lets you know that the machine on the other side is responding to what you're doing. So it's a conventional kind of thing, but it's a useful kind of thing. That said, because it's a convention, it has a cultural context. So if you've taken some other programming class, you probably have written hello world at some point in that programming class, or in some curricula where you had the first thing you had to do was ask it to say hello. So whenever I put this here in this notebook for you all, if you've had those other experiences, this is almost a reference to those other experiences. It may lead you to recall those other experiences with programming, and you might have different feelings or have had different kinds of experiences with programming. So this statement situates you in those in that space already, just by being a callback to that convention. But as a human expression, as an idiom, when we say hello to people, that's a common greeting. It kind of makes sense that we would think of our computer as an interlocutor in certain ways, like we are kind of sending it instructions and then it's sending us back its process of having worked through our instructions. So it's almost like a conversation. And I think for some people who are beginning to learn programming, I think thinking of it as a conversation can be a helpful framework, where you're typing instructions in the special language that this computer understands. And if you've written those instructions correctly, it's going to follow those instructions and it's going to do what you asked it to do. Often it's a step-by-step instruction process, right? So thinking of it as a conversation, it kind of makes sense in the context of this hello world. Hello, of course, is an English word. I don't know the etymology of that word off the top of my head, but it is a word that is in the English language, and other languages have different words that mean the same thing, but sometimes they are kind of the same thing, but kind of not the same thing. They might have different suggestions or other kinds of resonances with different things, like the word that we think of as translating to hello. In some languages, might more literally translate to good morning or good day, and that kind of means something different than just hello. So there's all these things that kind of become part of the potential conversation as soon as we insert human idiomatic expressions into it. So I'm kind of curious to see what you did here. My instructions are literally just to change this into some other greeting. And then on Friday, when we talk about this, I'll ask you to reflect a little bit on like what other greetings occurred to you. Like salutations, good day, good morning, goodbye. I mean, whatever, anything is fine. It's just, I'm kind of curious about those choices, because by giving you, almost no guidance in terms of how to do that, you kind of have to figure out how to do it, and you figured out what worked. And maybe if you did something wrong, you had to fix it and it worked. And then, you've learned a bit about how the syntax works. Okay, a couple things that I can probably point out here about the syntax that might be helpful. Let me just zoom in. Is the syntax does matter. So these things here, these characters are red. They are red just by coincidence. That's the way that this particular editor chooses to color code things. That's called syntax highlighting. And this particular editor and this particular theme I have here, I don't know if there's different themes actually. Maybe there are. But the way it's printing right now, these are all a special kind of thing that's different than these other characters next to it. So I just changed that. The parentheses you can see are black, and the print is kind of a greenish gold, I guess. And that's because those symbols mean different things to the computer, and they're going to do different things with it. In this particular syntax editor, red means that it's data. That means that the computer is not actually reading this or trying to understand this. All it's doing is thinking of that as a chunk of stuff. And I can change that into a different chunk. That chunk's difference might be meaningful to me, but it's not going to be meaningful to the computer, at least not in this case. It's just going to be printing back a different chunk that I give it. But these other things are actually code words, so they're colored differently in this editor to signal that to me, to remind me that this is different, but also to kind of help me kind of visualize, to visually verify that I've written this code syntactically correctly. So what happens if I do something wrong? Like if I wrote, instead of print, let's say if I wrote it, plint, you notice it changed into a black text, like the typeface here changed. So there's a typo I know about because I just made that typo. But the color changed as kind of an early warning. And if you learn to pay attention to that, it can help you figure things out as you go. So, but let's try to run it and see what happens. Uh-oh, it's turning red. Name error. Name plint is not defined. So it wanted to understand this as a variable name, and there's nothing called plint in its system, but there is something named print in its system, and the thing that is named print to Python is the function that sends something back to the terminal, back to the screen like this. So that's what's happening there when you change that. So all of that is packed into this. I could keep going, right? I mean, we could talk about the parentheses. Check this out. This is an interesting error message you can get if you forget the parentheses whenever you ask Python to print something, because, and we don't need to get into the nuances of this, but let me just double check. Nope. It's here to end this one. Nope. Where is it? Maybe it's just, maybe you can't change it anymore. I thought it was here. I thought you could change which Python version you're using, but maybe not. Anyway, there are different versions of Python. The one we're using here is Python 3, but watch what happens if I write it like this, which is actually how you would have written it in Python 2. It's going to tell me something along those lines. So here it says, hey, you forgot to print the parentheses in the print statement. So did you mean to print hello world like this with those parentheses? So this is such a common error that Python's error message actually says, hey, here's what you should have done. Like, here's what you meant to do, right? So we put this back here, and then we go. There are some other differences between Python 2 and 3, but this is the one I run into the most because I just forget to put the parentheses in there. Anyway, that's some background that you probably didn't even need to know about or think about if you've just used Python 3, but it's an example of all the different kinds of things that are happening here, even in this simple statement, or deceptively simple statement, right? So printing hello world, right? It has a cultural meaning and also a programmatic meaning, but it also introduces you to the basic concept of writing code and then seeing an output. These other things are pretty simple. I'm not going to go through each of these, but in both cases, I shouldn't say simple, they're similar in that they are hopefully fairly straightforward, but there's text here that explains it. The only one that's not straightforward is the error. And this one I am kind of leaving to you as a challenge. Like, it may take you some time to figure it out. You might need to learn a bit to figure it out, but I'm kind of interested in what you do to try to figure it out. So I want to ask you about that on Friday. I can think of several possibilities. So one is like you can search Stack Overflow by clicking the button as it suggests. You might get an answer this way. You could ask someone for help. You might get an answer that way, like pose a question in Discord and someone may help you. There's a tech support channel in our Discord, so maybe someone has already been discussing it there. Maybe you might see something there that will help you figure it out. Or you could, there's textbooks. There's all kinds of things. So see if you can figure it out and then put it there. If you have any notes or anything you feel like you need to add, you can add to this notebook here. Of course, you get to keep this notebook. When you turn it in, you still have it. So if there's anything here that you want to remind yourself about, or maybe explain to yourself how you fixed the error, that would probably be a useful thing to do in a comment down here. Just use that space for that. When you're done, please do this. So go to the share section here. There it is. And then where it says only people with, the get link bit here, change to anyone with the link. And then make sure it's set to viewer and then copy link and then paste that into the submission page on Canvas. Of those of you who have already submitted a couple, I had to ask, I didn't do that part, so I had to request access to it. Not a big deal, but it's an extra step I have to do. So if you don't mind, please try to do this. One thing you can do if you want to think ahead a little bit, you can create a Drive folder that automatically has that permission setting for everything in that folder. And then if you just always put your Colab notebooks in that folder, you don't have to worry about this step anymore. As long as you put them in that folder, it will have that sharing, that setting for sharing. So just a tip maybe. Okay, so I want to kind of talk through this a bit more after I've seen your all's, see what you all do with it. Partly this is me getting a sense of where you are with this stuff. So I look forward to hearing about that on Friday. I will ask you about it. I'll ask you on Friday how did it go, and then we'll kind of talk through it if there were any issues. Okay, so if you do have questions, of course, again, put them in chat now. That would be great. Let me move on, though, because I wanted to talk about some other stuff. Oh, yeah, so let's do it this way. So there's two things I wanted you to look at, and a couple of questions, or pretty interesting questions raised by Nick Montfort. So I'm curious to kind of pose those to you. You can respond in the chat if you want, or but I'll just kind of talk through them too, because again, this is more of a lecture day. So this question, why program? And this is a question that I think is a pretty good question. I think it's a question that you might be asking in the context of this class, like why are we doing programming in this class that the professor keeps saying is not a programming class? So why is there programming in it? And like, doesn't that make it a programming class if it's a class with programming? Maybe you're wondering these things. This is not a programming class, and we will do plenty more besides programming, but programming is here, and it's kind of visible here because it's one of the first things we're really doing together as a class. So I think this is a relevant question. I think this is a good question to ask right now. So let's look at how Nick Montfort approaches it. In fact, let me try doing it this way. So that didn't work. Let's see. There is a tool that is built into Canvas. I just really tried it out in some detail this morning, and so I'm going to try it right now. This is maybe a little risky to do it just live on the stream, but I think it'll be fine. This is a tool called Perusal, or maybe it's Perusal. I don't know. And it's something that in my electronic literature class we tried out this morning, and it did seem to work in the sense that some students were able to get into it. I invite you to do this as well, and you can do this while I'm talking. I think this will work. Let me show you how I get here, and then so you can try it out while I'm talking if you want to, and then I'll actually show you how to use it. So this is from our Canvas page now. There's a Perusal link at the bottom left of the navigation. This will, I'm pretty sure, only work on a desktop. If you're on mobile, this is probably not going to work. But if you're on a desktop, I mean, you could try it on mobile. Maybe it'll work. Probably not. But if you're on the desktop, try it here. Click on Perusal, and that will hopefully take you into the Perusal tool. There's probably a little sign-up step, but it won't ask you to create a new account. It'll just it'll make an account for you and link it to your Canvas account. So it's just a couple clicks, but it should be a pretty seamless process. You shouldn't have to make a new password or anything. But this is Perusal. Once you get here, this is the course homepage for our class. I think that's the terminology that they like to use. And then I've loaded the two documents for today in the library, so you can look at them over here. And this is Montfort Exploratory Programming. And what you can do here, looks like somebody else is already here, that's great. This is meant to be a social annotation tool, so that means that we can all look at this document together and annotate it together and see each other's annotations and respond to them. This is a little bit like Hypothesis, which you might have used in a web browser, but this is a more robust kind of ecosystem built around this document, and it's a more private ecosystem. So we can all have this conversation here, and we don't have to worry about anyone else who's looking at it. Looks like you all are joining it, and I can see you all with those dots there. That's pretty cool. It's just your initials, which is fine. But that's like, it shows my profile picture. Maybe it's still loading yours. Not that it matters. I'm just kind of curious how this is working. But now what we're doing here is we can take a look at this document, and we can, I can leave notes on it, and you can leave questions on it, and we can kind of work through it together, as a class, and have this conversation around some of the ideas here, which are somewhat complex in some cases. So let me kind of take a turn through this and show you how to do it. So this is, well, let me scroll down a bit. He provides some background on how other people have done this. He's talking about in the context of digital humanities. This is I should have said, this is the appendix to a book called Exploratory Programming for the Arts and Humanities. I think that's the full title. But it presents this idea of exploratory programming, but it's a textbook in how to program. And so if you want to learn how to program, this is a decent textbook to learn from. It is optional. Like I think it is in the bookstore for this class, but listed as an optional text. I think there is also an open access version of this book, although I haven't looked for it. Even if there's not, there are ways to get it. FYI. But this is the book that we have here. This is from the appendix, so it's not like the chapter 1. It's kind of mentioned in the introduction of the book, saying, hey, by the way, I've got some thoughts about this. But then Nick Montfort gets into the kind of how-to stuff. So Um, okay, thanks, Shannon. I see Shannon's comment on Twitch, but yeah, check this. If you're watching, Shannon, check this out. Like, see if I'm using it right. You may have other advice. So these are the three ideas. Or the claims. So these are things that Nick Moffat is presenting to us. He provides evidence, but because this is written as a persuasive document, we could agree or disagree. Like we can respond to this by thinking, "Oh yeah, that's right," or "Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense." And those are always valid responses to anything, especially when it's this kind of wonky philosophical stuff. So here's the first claim. How does it? Oops, I highlighted the wrong thing. The idea of this tool, as you can see, is to highlight something. So let's see if it'll let me highlight just that. There we go. So this is the first claim. And see, I can add these notes here to explain things, or I can actually pose questions. But I don't have a question on this one. I just have a comment. So that's the idea. Like, so now you should all see that. You should see, if you're watching this on your Perusal screen, you should see it like highlighted the way I did like that. It kind of didn't highlight the space between words, which is kind of strange, but that might just be something wonky about my browser. I don't know. So whenever you see an author do this at the beginning of a piece, like an essay, when they say bullet by bullet, these are my points, then you're probably going to see those points again. Like these are probably the signposts that will help you navigate the rest of this essay. And indeed, this is the case. So if you scroll down, here's a big subheading, cognitively programs help us, programming, well, it just scrolled to the top. I don't know why. Programming helps us think. And so that's his argument, elaborating on that initial claim that it allows us to think in new ways. So let's look at how he makes this case. Really interesting ideas here. So let me see if, I really liked Douglas Engelbart's metaphor for one thing. In terms of the workshop and kind of the motivation for someone learning to program is similar to someone who wants to work with wood needing to know how to change a drill bit or how to fix their hammer if it breaks. These are things that we need to know if we're going to get this work done. So that work context does kind of make sense. But let's think about this idea of a way of thinking. Let's see. Actually, let me back up a bit because there was a quote I really liked from this section. Oh yeah. Here's a claim with several embedded claims here. So this is ultimately the thesis, I think. That he's saying that the case for programming would not be as strong if programming were merely instrumental. So what do you think, and I'll see if I can I highlight a sub part of no, not that part. Yeah, this interface is a little bit laggy, but I think, let me see if I can just highlight that phrase. No. Clickety, clickety. It's not letting me click on the part I want to. You know what, I'll just add it here. Okay, so let me pose it this way. So what do you think Montfort means by merely instrumental? All right, so I've posed this as a question now in Perusal, so you should be able to answer it here by typing in here if you want to, or you can just answer it in the chat if you'd rather not, or if you haven't figured out how to get into Perusal yet. I think this is a really important thing to clarify before we even moving on, actually, because if Nick Moffat is saying programming is not this, it's something else, we need to understand what the thing is that he says it's not. Like, what is that thing that it is not? And then let's see if we can figure out what it is, actually. But what does it mean when he says merely instrumental? You know, what is merely instrumental in that case? That's the question, I think. So if you have an answer, if you have an idea, add it in any of the chat options. You basically have three choices right now. You can do Twitch or Discord or Perusal, and I'll see them all, I guess. And it looks like, Shannon, you're in Perusal too, so that's cool. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. If you have a suggestion, let me know. But what do you think? And I think it'll just pop right up like a push notification, essentially. Amber, no, not necessarily. I'm just trying it out for today. And if we do use it again, it would be, I would direct you to use it. It's not something that you should look at independently of what I'm directing you to through the modules. I think it does have those capabilities. Like I think you can do assignments and notifications and reminders and stuff like that through Perusal. You can almost manage the whole course through here, I think, but I'd rather not. Okay, so Matt has added an answer here that it has a baseline utilitarian use. So I think utilitarian, I think, is a nice synonym for instrumental. But let's think about what does that mean to be instrumental? What does it mean to be utilitarian in those cases? So, sure. Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, we're not using Perusal for management. I'm not going to do things like that. Sure, but I will pose the question here. What does Montfort mean by merely instrumental? And oops, not. There you go. Yeah, merely instrumental or utilitarian. Like, what are these things? What does that mean exactly? Like, what does it mean to be? What does it mean to be these things? And you can tell by the way he calls it merely, or I think Matt's comment had something like only or baseline, like, right? I mean, what is that force kind of pushing that down? Like, why is that only down here as opposed to what else it might be? Even before we get to whatever else it might be, like, what is it that we, what is this narrow view that we're talking about? Or why is it wrong? I mean, I have my ideas, but I'm trying to leave space for you all, but it doesn't seem like anyone's typing, so maybe you're just waiting for me to tell you. I can tell you, I want to see what your ideas are. Well, add them later if you want. I mean, there's the thing with Perusal, like, you can add it later. It's just like it also works live, which is kind of fun. Oh, people are typing now. Great, I'll let you all type before I give you my thoughts. Looks like you all are typing those in Discord. Cool. Let's see. Well, I'm not sure, Amber, what you mean by that. Because, like, applying to our daily lives could be true if it's utilitarian or not, or exploratory. Like, we're trying to do is kind of work our way towards a definition of exploratory. So we can be exploratory in our daily lives, or we could be utilitarian. I think it's better to be exploratory. So yeah, I mean, there you go. You kind of jump to the end with Douglas Rushkoff's idea. Like, if it's the idea to not be programmed, like that's kind of the gist of it. Like, that's kind of the I guess the motivation. But let's think about like what it actually looks like. So Carrie's idea is possibly helpful. So it makes you think of something like a calculator, something that's just a tool to reach the end. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. A utilitarian is like a calculator, yeah. And also, yeah, as Pikachu's heart says here, making video games versus just playing them. I think that's a good example. And I think that Rushkoff touches on that a lot, I think. The idea that in some ways, by growing up with media, by growing up with the internet as something that you sort of take for granted, I think there is and I would disagree with it, but I think there's an idea of like so-called digital natives, and there's an assumption that people that have grown up with the internet are just kind of naturally better at using it and working with it. And I actually don't think that's true. And if anything, it might be the opposite. I think people have different reasons and different experiences. Like, it's really people's realities are much more diverse than any of those simplifications. But the point is just that in a lot of ways, the shift or the general like inertia, the trend of design in the internet and social media and things like that have been working to make you less in control of it. Like, it's an evolution that I've seen in my lifetime and in my use of the internet. so that you as a user of the computer today, unless you take some extra effort, know less about the computer you're using and how to use it than someone may have 20 years ago. Not to say that they're better than you or anything like that. If you're whichever position is fine, but I think that a lot of ways that there are lots of ways in which your experiences are different because they've been designed to be different. And for example, designers of operating systems like Macintoshes and Windows have decided that you as a user don't need to know what a file extension is. So they hide them from you. And you have to know, first of all, what they are and how to turn them on and to go looking for them. But you're not, I mean, you're kind of using your computer with blinders on until you do stuff like that, until you make those kind of tweaks to actually understand what you're doing and what different files are and how they work differently. And file extension kind of gives you the way to figure that out. So that's just an example. But yeah, video games versus playing them. Yeah. So, and then Brandon on Twitch is saying, programming is a language, and all language is the foundation of thought. When we begin to define language into different ways, we open up possibilities to different thought. I think that's very well stated. If you think about, like, I don't know if you've taken, hopefully you've had a chance to take a foreign language, but I think there's a point where you get to a certain kind of fluency where you start to think in that language. And if you, especially if you get to learn from several different languages, you start to notice how just the way that they tend to put sentences together in those languages gives you different ways of juxtaposing ideas and thinking through different ideas. And sometimes, like I think poets that are multilingual can sometimes come up with really surprising turns of phrase because of that ability to think in different languages, and they put that together in English, and it's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. So that's a great example, Brandon on Twitch. But programming does that too, and I think the idea that programming is merely utilitarian is a way that many people think about it. Even people that are programmers, if you think of it as just getting a job done, that's fine, except that that's never really what you're doing if you're really a programmer. It's not like you sort of type make video game and then you have a video game. Like, you have to think through every problem that you have to solve in order to do that, and there's a lot. And I think really when we think about programming as coding, as like typing the right words to make the thing happen, I think we're missing a huge part of what programming actually is, which is problem solving with systems. And so it's like, if I'm making a video game, I need to know, like, am I using an engine? How do I interact with that? Is there an IDE? How do I, there's so many other questions that and little problems you have to solve in order to solve the big problem of making your game. So that's the kind of thinking that programming can help you explore. And you can think through those things if you know a little bit about how those things are expressed and how those different pieces can add together. And it just starts to make more sense that way. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, interesting question from Shannon. Do we think math suffers from the merely utilitarian problem? That's a good question, Shannon. I don't know enough about math education right now. I think math is a fascinating subject and ultimately really a philosophical subject. But I think if we approach it as a utility, I think it can be a drag. So I don't know. But if we approach it as a way to solve problems and answer questions that we didn't know existed, like what is a zero, for example? Like, that's a question that can come up in math, but like you can, if you look at it as like the thing that's to the left of a one on a number line, you can operate with a zero. But if you try to explain the idea of like, what is zero really? Like, is it, it's a mark for nothing, but if it's a mark, it's not nothing. We need to signify nothingness. Or is it's not really nothingness, it's just like, it's the absence of somethingness. And so, like, how do these things work? And you can get really philosophical very quickly in math, I think, anyway. Yeah, good. Okay, so interesting ideas too from Marie Lynn there. The idea of, you're correct that those that can master it can use it in ways that kind of give you a leg up on those who can't use it. And that's implied certainly in Douglas Rushkoff's piece, not if not fully stated, just the idea that that programming competency can be a form of power and can be explored and exploited. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I don't know what you mean by 2 + 2 = 5, except that that's incorrect. But this is Brandon's question on Twitch. I think I know there's a joke like 2 + 2 = 5 for very large values of 2. That's a version of that joke that I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but what is a 5, right? Like, that's the philosophical question. Like, what is it, like what when we talk about 5, are we talking about having 5 of something, or are we meaning having more than 4 as a symbol in a line that is a set of other symbols that can be manipulated in a way that has internal consistency? And those are two different ways of thinking about number. There's other problems with numbers too if you kind of think through it. Like what does it mean for what is 5? Is 5 the set of all sets that contains 5 elements in it? If so, then the number 5 cannot be included in that set because there's only one type of set that can include all of those other sets. And so we get into these kind of tangles with math. So math can be very, very interesting, but that's not necessarily where we need to go. But calculus can also be really practical and philosophical at the same time, if you want. Anyway, let me move in a bit to this because I want to see if we can think through this in terms of how programming helps us think in new ways. It helps us understand culture and media systems, and it can help us improve society. So these are the 3 claims. Let's see if we can visit with these a little bit. So the idea that thinking, it's a way of thinking. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity to do carpentry or thinking about, or like putting holes in something or shaping a piece of wood. But I think there is a lot in common with it, not because it gets something done necessarily, although that is true, that it is useful often to program something that's useful, just like it's often possible for me to make something with wood that's useful. Like I made this desk I'm using, and I made this curtain rod that's over here. I had a problem I needed to solve, and I made something that did it. But along the way, the set of things I had to think about to make that happen had to do with like, okay, so I need to hold this shape, but it needs to be on this part of it. So how should I kind of pin that down this other thing so I can use the drill, so I can use the Forstner bit to go through this thing without ripping through the other side. And I had to kind of solve all those problems. And because I know the tools I have, I know how to use them, I could think through all the steps of those processes before I even started. If I were just given a piece of wood and then like told to turn it into a curtain rod, or curtain rod bracket, I guess. I made the bracket, not the rod. Then I would be like, I might be lost unless I knew what all the different tools I had to use. Or, just basic problem solvings. Oh, is the woodpecker there? Oh, neat. Okay, sorry. Yes, that is the downy woodpecker. And I'm not going to open the curtain to look at it directly. I'm just going to switch to the bird cam momentarily so I can see it in full view. There it is. Oh, yeah. I don't know if that's a he or she, but there is a pair of them, so it's probably a nesting couple or pair, whatever, boyfriend, girlfriend. I don't know what they call. I don't need this message here today because that was for yesterday, but yeah, he's gone. Thanks for pointing it out. Thanks. Oh, that was awesome. Has he been there a while? That's great. So he's, it's, yeah, I know made this the right term, but I don't know which one that was, but they love the suet. They go for that stuff in the winter time. It's like really fatty, so it helps them, stay warm, I guess. Cool. Thanks for telling me about that on Twitch. So anyway, so that was exciting. So let's talk about programming some more. Because I know we have about 5 minutes left. So Engelbart's workshop metaphor makes a lot of sense to me. I really like it. Other things, thinking in generally, this is a bit of a tangent almost in this essay, but this idea that doing programming could be a good thing just for your brain, like to make your brain better. I think that's interesting too. I don't know if that evidence really supports that, but that's interesting. I like this statement here from Rushkoff, and we're not going to have time to get into Rushkoff's essays in detail, except I would note that it has a kind of teleological or theological orientation to it, and I think that's interesting. I think it is what I would call deterministic in its outlook on how technology relates to things we can do with each other in culture, and I don't fully subscribe to that, but I think it's still a really useful way to think of it. And also, I ultimately agree with his claim that the more we know about programming, the less risk we have of other people taking advantage of us for what we don't know. And so that's a big motivation in this class. I want you all to understand things about programming and computers that you don't know yet, or that you may not know you don't know, and that you're able to use to better understand things that you see around you. For example, we're talking about algorithms, and we are going to be talking about and trying to make a few. And an algorithm is really just a set of, in the literal sense, it's a set of steps that have a kind of step-by-step way of solving a problem. So it's like usually expressed as a series of if-then kind of statements. So you can think of it as a flow chart. If we go down here, and if it's this way, then we go that way, and then if it's like, well, we'll see what things look like at this point, and then if it's a certain way, it'll go that way. And I'm not doing a great job, but I can diagram it later. The point is, it's a kind of decision making Kathy O'Neill has this great expression that an algorithm is really an opinion encoded in math. And I think that's a great way to think of it because math doesn't have opinions, but people use math to express opinions. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about algorithms. In social media, people talk about like the algorithms on Facebook or on Twitter that put certain conversations to the forefront of the conversation, and people have different feelings about what kinds of conversations they see coming to the surface, and they want to blame the algorithm. But let's try to understand what kind of thing might be going on in that algorithm, or what an algorithm is capable of doing that would help us understand how to assess those claims when they come up. Like, does it have those, have those different orientations? It looks like on Twitch somebody believes that's the male because they have the red patch. I thought they both have the red patch though. I mean, if you've looked it up or if you know, then I believe you. But I thought they both had the red patch, but they might be different patches. In any case, it was cool to see it, whatever it was. But yeah, to the point, I think the more we know about how to make code ourselves, the more we understand how other people have made code, and we see it differently. And it's a metaphor. It's kind of cheesy, but the whole like moment in the Matrix where Neo sees the world made out of code. That's a it's a symbol. It's a special effect. It's kind of a cool part of that movie. But there is a sense in which you see the world differently when you start to see the processes that lead to the things that you see in the world. And the more you can see those processes, the better. And also the more you can see how processes create those experiences, I think the better off you can be. Ultimately, the argument that this chapter ends up with has this concludes with this idea that we can make a better world. Like we can actually have a more utopian society because of it. It's very optimistic. I like optimism. That's good. But we have to get there to see if that's actually going to happen. And that's really what this class is partly trying to do. And as much as possible, I'm trying to create things like this that aren't just sort of here's how you do programming, but here are some ways you can explore ideas with programming. This one maybe not so much. A couple of the other ones hopefully are getting a little bit more thoughtful in that sense. But even in these really simple expressions, or hopefully simple expressions, you can start to see and understand things like a cultural context for the hello world statement, and start to think about how that shows up and why. So I don't know how much that makes sense. I hope it makes sense today. I've been kind of riffing on some different things, but check out Perusal. If you have questions about different parts of this, then highlight. You can highlight and leave things too. Like so you can do this where like I have highlighted and then you can type a response. You can do that if you have a question about any part of this. They're loaded here in Perusal now. I'll see if I can link you to this in an announcement perhaps. It's not additional homework really, it's just a different way to experience these essays that I think could be useful, and I'll probably refer back to these or pull these back up on Friday when we have our Zoom. So yeah, just FYI basically, and it seems like it's working okay as far as the basic structure of it. So anyway, let's see, this class is over, right? It's 2:30 is when we end, I think, so yeah, because 1:40. Okay, let me just double check to make sure there's nothing else I need to remind you about. There's so much more to say about both of these essays. I hope that I didn't ramble too far away from the main point of these things. I think the main idea that I wanted you to get is that there is value to programming, but it isn't just so that you learn how to program, because that's a tautology. Like that doesn't explain anything. But it's that we can think through ideas and we can understand the world in different ways because of what programming lets us see about it. When we start to see the constructedness, when we start to see kind of the lines behind the world, then I think we can experience the world differently and better. I think we have a better experience of the world, and we can explore questions, we can answer questions, we can explain things to each other in ways that are richer and more interesting. That's my opinion anyway. But what do I know? I'm just the professor. So this is the, I'm going back to the module, not there, going back to the module page. If you haven't already answered the question why program, that's a discussion page in Canvas. So please do that. That was due today. So if you haven't done it yet, you can still do it today. You should. I'm not grading it per se, but I want you to do it so I can kind of see what your thoughts are and I can have a conversation with you about them. I've been the only one talking today. But definitely do that and the code practice by Friday. And then on Friday, we'll talk on Zoom on Friday. One of the things I'll do there is introduce and explain a little bit about the short story because it is kind of unusual and I want to make sure you're prepared for that. But on your own between now and then, in addition to the code practice, possibly the discussion page if you haven't done that yet, check out these ideas by Kathy O'Neill. I think they're really interesting and I think will add a lot to what I've been talking about today anyway. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the stream. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. I'll start off. I'll switch on the bird cam for a few minutes if you want to watch the bird cam, but I'll stay online for a minute and I'll just turn off my mic. But good talking to you all today. Um, Good seeing you chatting anyway. I didn't see you in person unless I saw you this morning, a couple of you, but seeing you online was good. So I will see you all virtually on Zoom on Friday. So hope you have a good afternoon. All right, I'm going to switch off my mic and turn on the bird cam for a few minutes. So see you later. And of course, there's no birds, but there might be.